few weeks ago I made a video on pistols with red dots, and I got a lot of the same responses. Most of them being, you probably won't see your sights when it matters. Most concealed carry encounters happen within 7 yards, close enough that a sight picture would barely even factor in. And yes, the data backs that up. And if you're building a training plan, 7 yards and in isn't a bad place to start. But then recently, a concealed carry holder in Twin Falls, Idaho returned fire on an active shooter that was well outside of that range, also with bystanders scrambling for cover around him. That doesn't quite fit the 7 yards and in narrative. Jordan Salinas was carrying a suppressed FN-57 when a shooting broke out at the local burger town. In-N-Out. Salinas engaged while people were running around for cover. Some reports have the engagement distance well past what you would consider a typical defensive encounter. It's a rare situation, one that most people who carry guns will never encounter in their entire life. But it's the one incident where undertraining is not acceptable. Missing in this context could have dire consequences. The bottom line is that if you train for the average encounter, you're only going to be prepared for the average encounter. That's the main limitation. Salinas didn't get to pick which case he ended up in, and you wouldn't either. There's no version of that moment where, well, statistically, would get you anything. Personally, I prefer to train for a standard that covers both ends. So what does that actually look like? Accuracy, speed, conditioning, and being able to make decisions when someone's trying to actually hurt you.
Come on, there it is.
That last part doesn't come from just training on the flat range. Building marksmanship under mild stress is important, but not testing you against something that's fighting back. In my experience, boxing, Muay Thai, and jiujitsu are irreplaceable practices for stress inoculation. Nobody shows up to that moment with skill built just by default. It has to be trained. And that's the argument for pushing higher standards across the board altogether. A red dot isn't going to do anything if you don't have the conditioning to employ it. Furthermore, training for just good enough never quite gets us to a position where we would be prepared to take care of the fringe scenarios as well as the median ones. And those fringe scenarios are where it counts. They're disproportionately more lethal incidents. Mass casualties and active threats usually involve more rounds, longer distances, and more people at risk, therefore less margin of error for a prepared citizen. Being able to put rounds exactly where you want them and know where you don't should be the main priority for someone carrying a firearm in their day-to-day life. Skills decay towards whatever you've actually been practicing. If your training ceiling is set at the median, then that's the ceiling you're going to perform at under stress. People don't rise to the occasion, they fall to the level of their training. I try to continuously move the goalposts for speed and accuracy, as well as my own physical capabilities. If you truly want to consider yourself prepared, there should be no satisfaction from where you're at. This is a continuous pursuit, and mediocrity should be avoided at all costs. I'm not saying everybody who carries a gun should be a grandmaster or a black belt, but if you're going to carry one responsibly, the statistically likely scenario shouldn't be where you stop. Because if this incident in Twin Falls taught us anything, it's that the fringe case is real. So it's important that we train like we might end up in it. Because none of us get a vote whether we do or don't. Anyway, that's all from me, guys. It was a shorter video this week, but I appreciate you watching anyway. I hope none of what I said gave off the impression that I was trying to detract from what Jordan Salinas did that day. The man is an absolute hero, and I think all of us Americans could be inspired by it. So if you enjoyed, hit the subscribe button. We'll be back next week, and we'll catch you in the next one.
25-66. That was weird. It sounded like you almost did